Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new area of my office because I keep moving around. Variety is the spice of life. I wanted to address some of your questions that I have emailed with a few of you about, and I wanted to do it, for all of you because I also want to tell you what to focus on for your final exam. Also, some of you have mentioned that you did not see a lecture past IA Richards or so. I want to make sure that I cover those. Specifically, I'm going to talk to you about the things that are the most important for you to know for your exam and for your second paper. In addition, someone had asked me if I could write out the instructions to paper two. Most of you know that I did that via lecture, and I am going to go ahead and make sure that I get that done today and put that up for you. So you'll have written instructions if that is more helpful to you. That would be, awesome. Obviously, my goal is to make this as easy on you as possible. Now, most of you know that I would like to have your papers and everything by next Friday, which is dead day, the day before we start finals at Missouri State. And the reason for that is so that I have a week to grade everything and you get your grades on time. Also, we will be having a final. It will go up. It will go up on Sunday or Saturday. It will go up on Saturday of next week so that you can have until Thursday night or Friday morning, whichever way you look at it, to finish it. So you will have from next Saturday until the following Thursday night / Friday morning. It's going to be a midnight thing. So keep that in mind, and that is to keep us, within the bounds of the semester. Don't want to go outside of that, but you could take it anytime you want. It's just like the first exam. It's 150 points, short answer, multiple choice. And it generally doesn't take people longer than an hour and a half or so because these, are in fact 150 points instead of the 100 points because I switched to the two exams from the three. So they may take a little bit longer. So allow yourself as much time as you need to allow yourself. Please remember that you can only take the exam once. So do not submit it and then expect to go back and work on it again because that's not going to happen for you. However, you can leave it open as long as you want. And you have that entire week. It is, of course, open note, open lecture, open whatever. I discourage you heavily from Googling answers because part of the job of a professor is to put these answers to questions into context for you for the purposes of the learning that we are doing. Sometimes people say to me, oh, well, I Googled this and I got this from Plato. And it's like, well, that's out of Plato's Politics. We didn't read that. Or that's out of Aristotle's Poetics. We didn't read that. It's hard for me to know that you know what you're talking about when you pull from other sources that are, let's say, for example, class lectures from other universities, or you pull from a style website or a marketing website. I've gotten those too. So try to stick to as primary as you can get when it comes to your sources. I say this especially for your first paper because it seems like it's really hard to get those classical works, but they're all available online. I promise I can help you find them if you need me to. But in addition, for your second paper, most of the people that you're going to be working with in your methods section, which is where you're going to have most of your external citations, are going to be people who are potentially not dead yet or who died in my lifetime. Which I realize seems old, but it's not that long. So these are people who are very, very available to you in books or and especially books that have been put on online, or works that have been put online, essays that have been put online. And, I know the thought of going to the library sucks, but that's a possibility. There's always that option. So you have, some contemporary work coming up that is, of course, readily available to you online. So hopefully that will help you out in your research. Now, you may wonder what I keep looking down at. And what I keep looking down at is my phone. And the reason is because I have your syllabus pulled up on my phone, which you can't see. I just realized it just comes out as white light to you. But I've got your syllabus here, and I sort of want to go through it piece by piece. I'm looking for my glasses desperately. But, oh, here they are. And I want to go through it with you so that you know exactly what you need to do for the next 2 weeks. Next week, you have assigned readings from Ong and Zaldu, and we're going to skip those. So just don't worry about next week's reading assignments. I think it was silly for me to put reading assignments in week 16. That was dumb on my part. So we're going to stop with Lakoff and Johnson. So that's the first piece of information you need. The second piece of information that you need is that for this exam, we're going to have, let's see, apologies. We will have Ramus, Burke, Richards, Perlman, and Titeka, Toulmin, Foucault, Derrida, Cixous, that's how you pronounce that, Cixous is Cixous, and Lakoff and Johnson. So those are the only pieces that we're going to be addressing. And we're going to be addressing very specific pieces of those. And I'm going to talk about that next. So hopefully this will make your final very easy. Remember, my goal with the exams is to not trick you or make it difficult or memorize or anything. The work you do in this class is on the papers, and that is shown through the points. So it's really the papers I'm most worried about. I just want to make sure that you're reading, and even if you don't remember an answer, that you can find the answer. That's all I want from you. So keeping with that philosophy that I gave you in the beginning of the class, that's what's going to happen. So I'm going to run through relatively quickly what I think from each of these authors that you need to know. So if you've read them already, you might be like, oh yeah, I remember that. If you haven't read them already, you might think to yourself, okay, when I go in to read these, I know exactly what I'm looking for. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to start with I.A. Richards, I think. Yes. We're going to start with I.A. Richards. He is not a postmodernist. I think I actually mentioned this before. He is the one who gave us the 3 parts of meaning, essentially, right? The semantic triangle of meaning. He gave us 3 parts. There's the symbol, which is the word. There is the referent, which is the thing that the word is supposed to represent. And there is the reference, which is the sort of response that we have to that word or with that referent, okay? And when 2 people come to a communication experience, we don't come together and just say, oh, hey, let's overlap. Everything I want you to know, I'm going to send it from me to you, and you're going to get it. That doesn't happen, right? It never happens. No matter how many clear text messages we may send, people still get confused. Why does that happen? Richards was not interested in communication. He was interested in miscommunication. And he highlights that the relationship of a symbol to its referent is the most abstract relationship that exists. The relationship between a symbol and your feelings or ideas surrounding that symbol, and your relationship between the referent and your ideas about that referent are very clear to you internally as the receiver of a message. What's not clear is if the word that is being used by someone else is the same as the word that you think of, the referent that you think of. And this is obviously easier with more concrete words like, for example, a very specific dog. My brother just got a dog. It seems to be part beagle, part collie, part lab. I don't know. She's a Heinz 57. Her name is Summer, and she's white with these brown patches around her eyes and then a big black dot on her back. And she's short haired, and not the dog I would have picked for my brother, but he's in love with her. He thinks she's the greatest thing ever. And that's fantastic. So when I say dog, Summer, my brother, I've given you a description. It's very material, right? It's very concrete language. But if I say words to you like, I don't know, love, justice, peace, anything that is more or less concrete, I should say, it gets really sticky in establishing that relationship between a symbol and its referent. And that is what I.A. Richards gives us. And that's mainly what you need to know from him. Some people will say that this was the beginning of the postmodern era. I disagree. I think that this is the beginning of attempting to understand communication in not only what words do, but in also what they don't. And that leads us right into, you got it, Burke. For those of you who have experienced Burke in the past, I'm pretty sure you probably remember the pentad. A lot of students have experienced something with the pentad in one of your other classes. For example, you might experience it in 209 even, or in another rhetoric class if you took one, or even in your persuasion class. Overall, what you need to know from Burke is that his overarching paradigm was known as, or is known as, dramatism. What you also need to know is that from dramatism, there are three main sort of models or principles that we in communication study. The first of those is his theory of identification. He says that identification occurs at sort of the ground level. We just have common ground with each other. We're humans. We need water. We need air. We need food. I mean, that's just common ground that we share. But if we want to persuade people, we need them to identify with our cause. How do we get them to do that? Well, we have to go deeper into what things we share. We need more substantial things to share. For example, an urgency or an immediacy. A lot of people say to me, I post a lot on Facebook. You guys aren't following me on Facebook, I don't think, but I post a lot on Facebook about a cat rescue I work with. And I'm always like, we need money for this urgent surgery. If you love cats and you have extra money, that's probably not a big deal to you. To some people, it's like, why the hell would I donate to a cat's surgery? Why is that cat more important than some other thing I could donate to? And you know what? You're right. So if I'm going to get people to donate for a cat, for example, I need to make sure that those are people who have, first of all, disposable income for that, but also secondarily that they love animals so much that they see a reason to help an animal who's been burned or needs a new hip or whatever is going on with the cat, got hit by a car, you name it. I've seen it all at this point. So you have to dig deeper into those substantive values that we share. When you do that, when you tap into that, Burke says you absolutely have achieved persuasion. He calls it consubstantiality. So look for that word. Consubstantiality occurs when we have those deep values, we share them, we identify them and share them. Then we can persuade. The second from Burke that you need to understand is known as the guilt redemption cycle. Actually, when I say you need to understand the theory of identification, the idea of dramatism, that the world is a drama, literally a play, those things, those two are very important. The guilt redemption cycle is only something that you need to know if you're particularly interested in the motivation for people to act because they act out of guilt. Now, look, I'm Catholic, okay? So I feel guilty about everything. I'm also Italian, so double guilt coupons, right? I mean, I get, I accidentally slept through a meeting last week with a friend of mine, and I still have not forgiven myself for it, even though she has. Things like that bother me. And by the way, sorry about World War II. Oops. Sorry about the crash in 2008 of the stock market. My bad. Like literally, we take on a lot of guilt. And if you know someone who was raised that way, you understand what I'm talking about. For those of you who are not familiar, basically, in the most people who were raised Catholic sort of believe we are not worthy to even be on the earth. So we walk around with a great sense of guilt that everything that's wrong with the world is our fault. Most of the time people joke about it. I do too. But when it comes to Kenneth Burke, it's not really a joke. Burke, like me, was born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania as a Catholic. And so he describes this way of being motivated to speak to others, to identify with others, to communicate with others based on this guilt. So he says we live in this world that is a drama. It's a play. It's a symbolic world. It's a world created by symbols, words. That's the way that we have a world, is because we use words and communicate with each other. So that symbolic world exists, and that symbolic world has an order. We don't talk to people certain ways based on the context. We take all of the things that we've been talking about into consideration. The rhetorical situation, the power relationship between the audience and the speaker. You take into consideration your role, your reason for speaking, etc. And when we violate that order, we make a misstep. We do something we shouldn't have done. We get caught cheating, whatever it is. When those missteps happen, it violates the order. We must find a way to redeem ourselves. And Burke says there's two ways to do that. One, through mortification, that is self-blame. It's all my fault, definitely, but I'm better for it. Here's what I'm learning from it, and I can transcend this issue. The other is blame and scapegoating. It's literally to blame someone else for all of the problems and take it off of yourself. His example, I know I hate it, but his example, because remember he was writing in the 60s, was Hitler. That Hitler convinced everybody to do his bidding because he blamed the Jews for every problem that the Germans had. Okay. And so that's on a very big scale. And he does this by looking at Mein Kampf. And in Mein Kampf, which means my struggle, he literally tells the world what he's going to do. And we apparently all just went, okay, sure, sounds great. That is fantastic. Have at it. And it wasn't quite that. I'm being flippant, but the book literally outlines what he was going to do, and then he went and did it. He did it out of, in Burke's philosophy, a guilt that the order was challenged, and particularly by Jewish individuals. And so a little bit frustrating. Here's my example. And the reason I'm telling you this is just in case you want to use it for your second paper. A lot of people like to use this for their second paper. I don't really know why, but I guess because there's a lot of guilt out there. And it does explain why people do certain things. For example, the entire album by the Dixie Chicks, Not Ready to Make Nice, is exactly in response to some guilt about some perceived violation of the symbolic order. Okay. So my example, though, that I always use is I would get into the elevator in Craig Hall. And this was, 15 years ago when I first got here. I still looked like a student, maybe an older student, but still a student. I dressed like a student. And so people would get into the elevator with me and they would go, "Oh my God, I just failed that test. I cannot believe what just happened." You know what? I probably because I was drunk last night, but I really think it's that the professor was tricking us, and she wrote a really, really tricky exam, and I just sit there and listen to these people go through all the stages of redemption, right? And this is on a very sort of minute scale. It's an exam. It's not. We're not talking about genocide, but it happens all the time. I mean, there's so many violations going on there. First of all, you're in an elevator. You're not supposed to talk. That has gone out the window. But it used to be that you don't talk in an elevator. I do it all the time. Secondly, you've got a professor standing there with you, and you need to be concerned about who's around you who might be hearing you. And I mean, I got a giggle out of it, but it still might be something that you don't, you want to be aware of your surroundings and understand what symbolic order you're in before you start just further violating the order. So you failed this exam, you've got to call everybody you know, right? And tell them about it. So that's really problematic. I think that that's enough. If you want to use the guilt redemption cycle, let me know. Send me a text, pop me an email, but make sure that I get it. So if you don't hear from me within 24 hours, I'm going to be gone this weekend. So within 48 hours this weekend, if you send it this weekend, let me know and I will get with you. The next thing, the third piece is the pentad. Now, the pentad is extremely easy to understand. A lot of people tell me it's sort of plug and play. We view the world as a play, and therefore we should evaluate it as a play. Now, Burke was interested in motives, why people said what they said, why people did what they did. So he would actually look at 5 elements, scene, act, agent, agency, and purpose, and look for why people did what they did. And oftentimes he discovered that the scene, that is to say the context, would dictate what the agent did, what act the agent performed. Or the scene dictated the agency that agent had. They couldn't act, or they couldn't say anything, or they didn't bother to. Because they didn't feel like they could affect any change, right? There's all these different motivations. Now, you read a little bit about that, I hope, in your book. So that would be also a possible method if you were looking for that for week 2, or I'm sorry, for paper 2. The next person on the list is Perlman and Toulmin. And both of these guys here, they are turning us back to what they call the new rhetoric, which is ironically the old rhetoric. Let me tell you how this works. Around the 1960s or so, out of the Renaissances came this flourish of studying style and delivery only, right? Ramus really screwed things up for us. The artistic was what was most important, and focusing on the artistic and the sort of vague nature of communication as an art. And Toulmin and Perlman wanted to bring that back and say, wait a minute, this is about argument. Rhetoric is about making an argument and how to do that and persuade successfully in a mass audience. That's what Aristotle meant. So the new rhetoric is the old rhetoric in a lot of ways. This turn here in time is where we get the Toulmin model of argumentation, which hopefully you're very familiar with, and Perlman's focus on the audience. The idea that there's 2 audiences out there, the particular, the universal. You can read about that in there. That's what you need to get from Perlman. That's what you need to get from Toulmin. Okay? The next thing that you will come up upon is Foucault and Derrida. And as I'm looking at this, I'm going to have you skip Derrida. I'm going to have you skip Derrida. It looks like Derrida. That's how a lot of people pronounce it. That's incorrect. But Derrida, we're just going to skip that. We're going to focus on Foucault. Why? Michel Foucault, French, died in 1984. He, in the order of discourse and truth and discourse, what I want you to look for is how it is that we use words to construct others around us and how that aids us in alienating them, in pushing them out of the group, right? In groups, out groups, people who have a voice, people who don't have a voice. Foucault was talking about this long before anybody else, I promise. And he introduced it as an idea of critical theory. What do we mean by critical theory? Critical theory is a practice of examining an artifact of whatever kind to understand how it upholds or attempts to break down or create power relationships. Okay? So if somebody wants to talk to me about CRT, critical race theory, since that's like the big thing, feel free to give me a call, or we could talk about that separately. But it's not the same thing, and in a way it is. But critical theory for Foucault, the beginnings of that is just looking at the ways that we construct power relationships through our language. The next person, Sixu, The Laugh of Medusa. Read that partially because it's one of the few feminist writers that I actually include. And she talks about the way that women write differently and why that's important. Particularly, she says that women need to write their bodies. I'll let you read that. And when I say write, I'm talking about WRITE, their bodies. I'll let you read that. And then Lakoff and Johnson, Metaphors We Live By. Hopefully, this is in some way self-explanatory. I don't think that these are too complicated. What happened between the Renaissances and now? What happened in between there? A couple of things. One, there was a split in the understanding of rhetoric, right? There was the artistic, and there was the study of it as a science, a social science, or as reasoning. Okay. And some people separated that out, like Toulmin and Perlman. Others put it together, like Bacon. Bacon really tried to look at it as a science as well, but ended up talking about it in terms of art when he talked about his four idols. And then we had people just talking about style, which I don't spend a lot of time on because it's hard for me to talk about style. There's literally no substance. Get it? It's a joke. And so Toulmin and Perlman bring it back around to being about argument. But at the same time, there is this split, a perceived split. It's not real, but a perceived split between what people refer to as modernism and postmodernism. And modernism and postmodernism exist at the same time, okay? So don't think that postmodernism means it's a time period that comes after modernism. Postmodernism means we get beyond modernism. Short story on that. Modernism is looking at things deductively, linearly, that there's a progression to everything. Kenneth Burke actually believes in this progression. Stephen Toulmin gives us a model for a progression about argument, right? Very strict rules and regulations that we follow, a formula, very formulaic. If you think about modern furniture, mid-century modern furniture, it's very functional. It's not about super comfort, honestly. It's just about function. A chair is for sitting on, a table is for eating on or working on, right? There's not a whole lot of form that we're concerned with. Postmodern um, architecture, art, and literature interrupts all that. It says, look, there is no real progression here. There is no linearity. A sofa can be uncomfortable as all get out, but look beautiful, and that's okay. It doesn't need to function, which is weird to me, but I'm big into comfort. Um, so these two things sort of clash, and they still do, by the way, but not in a way that's unproductive, okay? Because there is a value in understanding the linear progression of something and understanding how that linear progression can be interrupted. The best example I can give you is that the best modern American novels of the 50s, 60s, 70s, even into the 80s, followed a very specific plot. They started out a very specific way. This was in world literature around. Okay. When the postmodern started to creep in was when people started doing things like Kerouac. Jack Kerouac decided just to travel and write down everything, like in no particular order, sort of stream of consciousness. Um, I think that another good example for you might be Pulp Fiction, a movie that was presented to people in the wrong order. There was a beginning, a middle, and an end, but the way that you watch it is the end, the beginning, and then the middle. So if you've ever watched Pulp Fiction and been like, what the hell was that? That's why. The people who figured it out sort of think that it's brilliant. It's it's got its pluses and minuses. There are times when I find that type of art particularly appealing. The probably the one that's most appealing are movies like Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which really takes you back and forth in time. And then there's also, I can't remember the name of it, but it's the story of the guy who I think murders someone and doesn't remember it and keeps remembering like short term things. And so he has to leave himself clues. I don't know why I can't remember the name of that movie. Those movies, basically what they do is they interrupt the idea of a linear plot, the standard characters, the idea of good and evil, a villain and a good person battling, that sort of white hat, black hat sort of Western ideal of having a very clean cut ending. And that's another thing. Endings become non-existent. The Sopranos was awesome in the way that it ended. Seinfeld ended a certain way. I was really kind of hoping Supernatural would end that way too, which is to say no ending. Unfortunately, they just went ahead and recorded an ending, which means it has to go away. So the modern idea in rhetoric is that it is functional, that we can communicate and persuade others. The more postmodern idea is that when we come to a communication experience like that, we have to understand we're bringing with us all of our preconceived notions, premises, etc., and so is the audience, and we somehow have to create that common ground, that shared meaning needs to be created. So it looks something more like this than just, that direct communication. It's not linear. It's more of a back and forth in order to achieve shared meaning and therefore in order to persuade. Okay, so that's all, like that's the quickest I've ever done all that, I think. I think I need to save this video for another day. But those are the things I want you to get out of your readings. And of course, anything else that you get out of your readings is fantastic. And you'll have the opportunity to include that and let me know. As I always say, tell me what you know. Don't show me what you don't know. I'll go ahead and get the paper 2 assignment in written form. I'm going to put that up right now after I finish this video. And again, you were supposed to have your paper 1 grade. Now, some people have gotten it. Some people have not gotten it. Some people have told me they haven't gotten it. And so I've gone in and there's a little button I have to click for each and every individual person. When this happens, I never know when it happens. If you do not have a grade for paper 1 yet, please let me know. And I will go ahead and make sure that I go in there and figure out why you don't have it. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns, complaints? Let me know. And hopefully this helps you get through the next 2 weeks, and then we're done.